Welcome to Breathing Underwater's Musicast. This is episode number 16. I have with me Dave. Say hi, Dave.
Yeah, this is Dave.
And Chris.
Yo.
So, first of all, we have decided to forego any kind of like structure or set structure or format for our episodes since I can never seem to stick to one. And with that in mind, we're also going to expand our scope and occasionally talk about more than just music when relevant. So, for instance, in this episode, we're going to cover some of our summer happenings, including concerts that we went to, and we're also going to discuss some movies along with some album releases. So I think our music cast is going to become more of a media cast, but I'm not going to rebrand it because I don't feel like going through all of that, the web presence to do that. Let's just dive right in. I think let's start off with just album reviews, and because we can go through those pretty rapid fire. I think I don't want to get too rambly. I have way more to say about movies. Okay, I'm gonna give you guys my list, and maybe we can just give like our little quick thoughts about each album, and then if there's anything else that you guys that came out that you want to talk about, please feel free to interject. So on my list, I have, let's see, I'm gonna start with something that we usually don't talk about much in the show, a little bit more on the poppy side of things, is the new Garbage album. And I'll let you guys talk first. So what do you guys think of Garbage, Not Your Kind of People? Dave, go ahead.
I haven't listened to it yet, so I'm out.
Well, okay.
I literally haven't listened to much of the stuff past their second album, actually. I need to put them on again.
I find that interesting because like I thought their well, at least their third album, which was Beautiful Garbage, was really solid. It had some like really good songs on it. Some of their more like more edgy stuff they've ever done, and also like very subtle stuff. I don't know. Chris, what do you think of the new one?
It was okay to pretty good. It wasn't anything quite groundbreaking or new from them, but it was, since they've been away for so many years as they have, it was just kind of like we're getting back into the swing of things. I
agree. I thought it took me at least half a dozen listens to actually kind of get a feel for it. I kind of thought it was kind of slow in some parts. Like the first few songs are pretty solid, and then it slowed down. But I was just glad that she made that Shirley Manson made a reference to being a Terminator somewhere in there in the album.
Oh yeah.
I thought that was very appropriate. All right, next on my list was Matt Skiba and the Sekrets, which, did that have an album title, or was it just...
I think it was self-titled.
Yeah. Chris, what do you think of that?
Having saw them live, which was a slightly disappointing show.
Well, you want to talk about that? That wasn't really a summer concert, right? That was before?
Yeah.
Yeah, so we won't really include...
Apparently, as I was not prone to knowing, he's had some personal issues, and...
No way.
Not nearly as much as apparently as I've seen online subsequently, but even at my show, it was just his vocals were kind of drowned out by their instruments slightly, and he didn't seem quite confident. The album itself was pretty good.
Yeah, I thought it stood up pretty well to pretty much any Alkaline Trio album for the most part. I mean, it sounded pretty much just like Alkaline Trio. I didn't really have much to say about it. I enjoy it. I think it's good. It's solid, and it's catchy, and I don't know. It's kind of what I've come to expect from Matt Skiba. I guess they're just a better recorded band than live band because, like I told you guys, the first couple times I saw them, I thought they sounded horrible. Like I couldn't hear the vocals, I couldn't hear the guitar. All I could hear was like bass and drums. And then I saw them again right before I moved to Maui. It was like must have been spring or summer 2009, and they sounded fantastic. So I don't know what that was all about. Dave, what did you think of the album?
I feel like it could easily be an Alkaline Trio album, but if it was, it'd be a lesser album. It would be like a more forgettable album of theirs if it was Alkaline Trio. Like it really has a sound. It's a bit more upbeat and poppy in a lot of ways, but it's all around pretty good for a side project. It which you don't always expect it to be great stuff, is listenable. It's not. It doesn't have a hook to Alkaline Trio's album to. I think with the rest of the creativity of the rest of the band, you don't have as much, but it's definitely worth having.
I feel like that's true with a lot of artists from bands that do a solo album. Like a lot of times it sounds a lot like their band. It just kind of missing something.
Yeah.
I think we kind of talked about it on an earlier one. Like Phil Anselmo was a good example. I don't feel like anything has ever really lived up to Pantera, even though some of it has been, sounding kind of like Pantera. But I think that's just true for a lot of these guys that go off and do their own thing. That's why, like, a lot of times, when bands, I think one reason they get really popular is because they have a dynamic or some kind of relationship that works really well amongst those members that just, they just make good music together, and then they go off and do it alone, and they probably take some of that away with them, their experience in songwriting through those relationships, but then they're just kind of missing that, like, extra spark. I don't know.
Exactly.
We'll do this one quick. I want to keep this short, even though I have a lot of vitriol for this next one, which was Spineshank's Anger, Denial, Whatever, Acceptance.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so Dave was with me in the car the first time, like a couple minutes after I downloaded it, put it on my iPhone, and we were driving around and listening to it, and like the first 30 seconds of the first song, I was like, oh, thank God, Spineshank's still a good band. And then, after how long, they were gone for, 7 or 9 years or something. And then like, song 2, 3, 4, 5, just rolled through those, and it was just, like, it was boring. It was, there's actually a review on the PRP, which I'll post on the show notes.
Yeah.
Did you read that one?
Yeah.
I thought they summed it up perfectly. I should have had it up, but they just said something along the lines of, like, it seems like Spineshank was just trying to do. They were trying to fit in with the current crop of, like, I don't remember what they call it, like alt metal, where it was just so formulaic. It was like screamy verse and singy chorus. Like I felt like every song was missing a hook. Every song was pretty much, with exception of like one or two songs almost at the very end, every song had almost the exact same structure of, like, verse, chorus, verse, bridge, and then like some kind of breakdowny part, and every verse and every chorus sounded exactly the same, and it really kills me that because I thought one thing that really drew me to Spineshank in the first place was how good songwriters they were. It wasn't even their genre as much as I just really, really liked their songs and like their kind of atypical structure and like delivery of songs that kind of stood out of the whole nu metal thing. Even though they had a lot of the same nu metal like pieces that made a lot of bands nu metal with, like, they were very aggressive and they screamed a lot, but then they also had the crooning, singing kind of stuff. And I was really disappointed too because Johnny Santos, the singer, after Spineshank broke up, he went on and did Silent Civilian, which the first album caught my attention. I thought it was really good. It was very, thrashy, and it's pretty repetitive, but, it was surprising. I thought he would kind of leave, though, some of that with that band and go back to Spineshank and do more of what made Spineshank good, but it really just felt like they were just trying to, like, I don't know, like, just fit in with the current trend, and that's just, like, really disappointing. So what did you think, Chris?
I haven't heard any of his solo stuff. I'll have to get that.
I wouldn't say it's solo. It's called Silent Civilian.
Oh, so it's a whole new. Okay.
But
okay.
it was just like it was like a separate. But the funny thing about that is that when he first got out of Spineshank is because he had said that he wanted to do less aggressive music, and he even tried to start this kind of like post. I was like this like rock and roll grungy kind of band or something. I don't remember what it was called. And then that went away almost immediately. And then like 2 years later, he came back with Silent Civilian, which was like Spineshank kind of churned up a notch, which I just found kind of interesting.
Metalcore Spineshank, I felt.
Yeah, good point. It was nothing new or original, but I just thought it was pretty, like, especially for Johnny Santos, I thought it was like kind of good. Just, if you need to put on some good simple thrash, you put on some Silent Civilian and you're good to go. Anyway, what were you saying, Chris?
No, it was just kind of a bummer. It made me wonder, like, it almost felt like they got back together and produced this album just because maybe they thought that they could reignite their musical careers based on the name.
Yeah.
And the old bands. but it just didn't work, and so maybe,
I'm just walking around.
They should just move on, do their own different things.
Dave, what'd you think?
Hey, when I heard it with you in the car that one day, you're right, exactly the same experience. No song hooked me. There was nothing. Yeah, everything that made Spineshank great in the past just wasn't there. It was just very half-assed effort. I don't know. And I was more of the older stuff, but
yeah, and I feel like at this point in that musical genre, if you want to put on something that kind of is that vibe, like Seven Dust has freaking like 10 albums or something. When I love Seven Dust, and it took me a while to kind of get over the fact that Seven Dust is incredibly formulaic, and all their songs are like sound almost exactly the same. But
yeah,
that kind of works for me for some reason. And it's like when you have bands like Seven Dust and then so many other bands like that out there that have that kind of formula going, that then they've like established it. Like, why would you do that too? I don't feel like at this point people are going to be like, oh man, Spineshank, yeah, like I don't get it. I don't understand what they were thinking, and maybe some producer gave them that. But so speaking of Spineshank, one of the band that discovered Spineshank was Fear Factory, and they put out a new album which was called The Industrialist, and I want to get your guys' thoughts on that. Dave?
It didn't really, no songs really hooked me. I gotta give it more listens. Maybe it'll grow on me, but it's like Transgression. I really didn't listen. Well, Transgression had more of a dynamic, and it had like a low point in the middle.
Yeah.
And so every song was very similar. It was a bit like, had the same feel and sound of Mechanized, and again, it's kind of like this again, cool, but I've heard the same vibe, same feel, same sound. It's like a repeat album. So I don't know. I'll give it a listen and see what happens. But
I agree. I thought something about Mechanized caught me, and even though like Mechanized was nothing new at all, but it was just so fierce and so like pulsing all the way through that and it's really short. It just really got my attention, and I liked just how like dripping with I don't know, like vitriol.
Power.
Well, it was powerful, but it was really angry. Like it felt like Transgression. He just Burton wasn't as aggressive, and this one, Mechanized, they came back and just really like up the ante on that. And then this new one, it just they were really hyping it as being another concept album, which is fine, but I don't feel like just because your songs tell the story makes the songs good. Or they're not bad. They're just, I don't know. I didn't get any much feeling from them. Like Mechanized, like really, especially. I mean, the stuff Burton does with his vocals on the aggressive side in the first song Mechanized. It was something that it just like really upped the bar a little bit, I thought. And then I thought that this was a little bit of a step back. Chris, what do you think?
I actually have not listened to it yet, so I'm going to have to opt out.
All right, that was easy. What about The Dreaming? For those of you that don't know, that is Christopher Hall's current band, who was the singer of Stabbing Westward, and he's continuing a similar vibe with just a little bit more. It's not metalcore, but it's got some metal tinges. It's kind of like punk metal, I would almost say, industrial punk metal. And this album is called The Puppet. Just Puppet. And I'm gonna go out on a limb and say that I really enjoyed it. It's almost exactly the same album as their last one, which is called Etched in Blood. I'm just kind of glad that Christopher Hall is just still making music, because I always enjoyed Stabbing Westward, especially like as an angsty teen. Had a lot of high school angst to hold on to with that album. With that band. And then The Dreaming is kind of cool, because kind of like we were talking about before with the other bands, it kind of upped the ante on what was going on with Stabbing Westward, and I just really enjoy that. It's really not that unique or original. His subject matter is very repetitive, about like relationships sucking, but it just works for me. I find the songs to be really hooky and very enjoyable. What'd you guys think of it, if you've listened to it?
I did. I have to get back to on it, because I I have a weird thing with Stepping Westward where, like, several years after high school, I realized I pretty much only liked the Darkest Days album.
Which is, in my opinion, their finest work.
Right, no, exactly. For some reason, that struck a chord in me as an angsty teenager. And it was almost, I don't know, like somehow they hit this weird, almost operatic spark in that album.
Yeah.
And so anything that I've heard, any of their other albums, and then the stuff that I've heard from The Dreaming has just seemed lesser to me. But that just, I think, might be my own personal bias.
Sure. Dave?
I heard a little bit. I really haven't listened to Dreaming very much. I've been meaning to put them on again. I remember listening with you a bit, and I liked it. We were into some conversation or something during that time. We were driving somewhere, but it was focused on too much. I feel like if I start, I really couldn't differentiate their albums. So I feel like if I start listening to them, I might like them again. I was thinking about Steven Westward and what's his name's work, where he's got this like he's very much that emo goth kind of mentality where like. I want like an idealized rescuer, and I'm like shit without you, and I should just kind of deal. Like it's like this personality type. You have like this pain all the time until you get that idealized rescuer, and you're nothing without him, and you know. So it sometimes I'm not always in the mood for that. Sometimes I am, but it's interesting. And Ted Westward and him were always the better artists to do that before the quote unquote emo days.
Right. I thought that they were. I mean, I know emo was spawned out of like post-hardcore, but I thought Stepping Westward most influential early like emo bands before this current, you know, what people call emo now, because they.
Oh yeah.
They were so like exactly like you said, they like that whole vibe of like, you know, that idealistic and not having the ideal of that love, you know, that all these emo bands are searching for, and then complaining about it.
I'll even go on a limb and say there's a certain personality that feels that they're essentially like don't know who they are or what they are. They're nothing until that rescuer comes, and you know, and they tend to be very artistic type of people, very emotional and sensitive. But
yeah,
I could sense half a mile away an artist like that.
I think that the thing that works for me the most about The Dreaming is similar to like what finally got me on board after years of resisting like my Chemical Romance and things was the tempo. It's very upbeat. I mean, the songs are very dark and, you know, like not happy, but the tempo is very punkish, where it's just like every song is just like kind of pounding all the way through. There's no ballads. It never slows down. There's no like kind of wasted energy. It's just all like bam 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 like all the way through. And all right, moving on. I'm almost done with my list here. Red City Radio album was called, Chris, what was it called?
I forgot it, but yes, I think it does. I really like it. For another album that came out this summer that I really liked, Gaslight Anthems, handwritten. It takes kind of like similar, like Gaslight. They take kind of the raw punk sound and wed it to like a very old school, going back decades, folk lyricism, and just make it like this great linking up between two styles that, you know, that always work well together. But it's always great to find a new band like Red City Radio that actually make it work in a sound that sounds, you know, timeless but new.
I don't think I really can add anything to that. That was very eloquent. Dave, did you like it?
I like their vibe, and I need to get around to listening to it. So
okay. Their EP I liked, like really worked for me. I liked it a lot. I thought it was fantastic, and I think I thought the album was like exactly the same. It was like really good. All the songs are really solid, and they're very catchy, and then everything that Chris said that I won't even try to repeat was put so well. But my only complaint about them, not a complaint, but just something that made me kind of like check my watch like partway through their album, is that I thought the songs just something about their vibe, and I think it's a combination of the guy's voice and his vocal range, and then the tempo and the keys that they play in, is that the songs really started to sound the same after a while, which isn't bad because they're really good songs, but I was sort of like looking for something else to carry me through this album other than, you know, what was working for the first handful of songs, or what was working on the EP. So I'm interested to see where they go from here. Like if they keep putting out albums like this, I think it really works really well for the first LP. But I'm wondering if they keep putting out albums where it's kind of like, it sounds like Red City Radio.
Hopefully they'll step it up on the second LP.
Yeah, what I'm talking about is like I'd like to see a little bit more dynamicism, and I don't mean like writing softer songs, because like a lot of bands are like, well, we need to change the pace a little bit. We need to make a more dynamic album. So let's throw in some like softer, slower ballads, and a lot of times those are just murder an album. It's not that as much as it is like it's such a fine art. It's so hard to define, but something that like changes your vibe up, something unexpected, and it doesn't have to be any one thing. So I'm not like advocating that they change their sound or try to do something that they don't do well, but I'm just curious to see where they go. But yeah, I think they're a good young band. I hope they keep making music. All right, almost done with my list. Let's do it and talk about Linkin Park's Living Things, right? These days, it's so hard. Like I don't, back when you had CDs and you had CD cases and you're looking at song names and album names and the album name staring at you in the face before you put the CD in. But now I'm just like, I don't pay attention to like album names or song names at all anymore. I haven't for years. So Dave, what did you think about Living Things?
I want to talk about, I think in the past podcast, how we were like the harder rock new school kids who like the more original new school, and we hated Linkin Park. They were this poppy, radio friendly flag, band. They're like Blink 182 of new metal. Yeah, we just hated them with a passion. Oh God, I despised them. But
they were definitely our scapegoat band.
Oh, they're our scapegoat band, totally. As you know, we got into the last two albums and then went into the older stuff. I was looking forward to this album. I was blown away by the last one. One day I thought, oh man, they might go back to a little bit more of their older, heavier sound, but integrate this new, like, more like ballads and more stuff. I feel like, I gotta say, I did not like this album one bit. It did not hook me. I felt like this album was like there are some good, like very emotional, almost moving songs, but they just didn't. I don't know. It's like something about the last album did it for me more than these songs. So I didn't feel it dynamic either. I felt like they were trying to, almost like they're trying to capitalize off or redo the greatness of the more softer, emotional songs from the last album. So this is older stuff. They barely have songs like that until the third album. Even the third album, they didn't have many quieter, more emotional songs very much. It just wasn't until the fourth album. And this song was, I don't know why some people were old school fans. I've heard some of you people say it's return to form and all stuff. I don't see this. There's no like breakdowns. There's no like heavy guitars. There's arguably, but not really. There's more rap in some of those songs. The one or two of the songs where there's more rap was pretty cool, but that's all that hooked me. The rest did not. I listened to them, I'm like, come on, I love the Ross album so much. It's my favorite album, and I'm like, something in this album hit me, and not really. Virtually no song hit me. I was very, very disappointed. So that's what I can say. I did not like this album. It felt like a very moderate, very hackneyed, not hackneyed, but very half-hearted approach, half-hearted effort.
It's nice to hear you so passionate about music again.
Compared to how much I loved their fourth album, or their last two albums.
Chris.
Oh yeah, ditto with, I became kind of a convert because we thought they were completely horrible in high school, but then when one of my best friends and roommates in college liked them, and I gave them another listen, and then it hit me that, with all the new metal influences and rap influences, they were still one of the best pop bands currently out there, and, ditto with all the albums up until now, but this one was just kind of a bummer. I think, like they were saying, they were saying they were going to have a return to form of the first two albums, but the finished product just kind of felt like maybe they were trying to do that. They realized they couldn't go do that they couldn't kind of go back to the past, and so they just got really scared and ended up producing a diluted, like, Linkin Park as top 40 radio pop, which, you know, they've never, I thought, quite been, even though they're definitely played on there. They never had that sound, but this album just really sounded like that. And it was a bummer.
I didn't dislike it as much as you guys seem to, but I agree with the kind of the letdown. The first time I listened to it, for some reason it actually like caught me on the first time, and I thought it was like really good. I was like, oh, this is awesome. But then the subsequent listens, like kind of tapered off the passionate enjoyment of it. But I find it pretty listenable. I find it pretty enjoyable. More as like you were saying, Chris, like more of like on the pop side of things. I find it to be more of a more like a fun listen in a way, not as much of like their last couple albums, which are very emotionally drawing. I don't feel the emotions as much as it's just like they're kind of fun songs, but they definitely to me are like they're lacking the depth, which is interesting because they said that they wanted this one to be more personal. They didn't, because their last couple albums have been very, you know, globally themed and politically charged and whatnot, but this one they wanted to make it more of a personal album and not be about such larger subject matter. And but for some reason I felt like that didn't really come across very well. By the way, I need to retract what I said a couple of podcasts ago, where I thought I had read a review or something where Chester had said that they were trying to like make the least new metal-y album that they could, or something like that. He had said something along the lines of like we were writing all this new metal stuff on purpose and then trying to do the exact opposite, or something like that. But I thought that was total nonsense. That this album to me feels like a sister album to Meteora, which was, you know, my least favorite album of theirs otherwise. And as you guys said, I mean, Linkin Park to all of us obviously was very much like a scapegoaty kind of, you know, we treated them as they were like the big joke of the new metal scene. We just hated them. But what really caught my attention about them was when I think it was Jason, not the one that's been on the podcast, but the other one, when he played a couple of their songs for him. He played the opening track, not the intro, but the opening track on Minutes to Midnight, which was a pretty ferocious track, and it surprised me, even though it's not, I mean, like, you know, next to like Slayer, it's not that intense, you know, necessarily, but like in context to who they are, I was like, wow, I didn't know they still had that in them.
Yeah.
And then it's followed up by like a few songs, you know. There's a Valentine's Day song in there, and the one about the I can't remember the name of the song, of course, but the shadows of the day, blah blah blah. That's a really really well written song, and it's softer, but it's still very like emotionally engaging. And I thought that whole album from beginning to end was like that. Like, it didn't matter if it was like a heavy guitar driven song or like a softer like beat driven song. I was just really surprised at the emotional dynamicism of the album and just how well the songs were written. It felt like they really spent a lot of time fine-tuning those songs into being like as perfect as they could be. And this one, it just felt like they were not really that involved in the songwriting process as much as they were just trying to like copy their earlier sound. Like they felt like this one was more of a sound album as opposed to like a songwriting album. Okay, so my theory about what happened with this album and why it turned out the way it did was that they, after 1,000 Suns, which was such a huge departure from their sound for the most part, that they scared off a lot of fans, you know, and
the more older hardcore Linkin Park fans like hate that album.
Right, and again, like just like Minutes to Midnight, what caught me about that album, because when I first heard it, I thought it was awful, because I was like, how could they just like, you know, take back the guitar so much and just make this like, you know, industrial edged album, and the kind of like industrial, like not like dancey necessarily, but just that kind of. It seems like everybody's trying to do more electronic stuff. Like if they're trying to be different, they go electronic, like My Chemical Romance and Korn and Linkin Park. They all kind of they're like, let's do something different. So let's go electronic. And that's fine, but it just feels really.
It ends up being these days. It's not like the Beatles and all their interesting, very creative ways, like getting the classical musicians drunk to do an album. Now it's just like let's just dubstep or electronica. And
I don't feel like they're really experimenting. I don't feel like bands are really experimenting. Like Korn, I don't really know if they were experimenting or they were just sort of like, hey, this is cool, let's do that. And I don't know if that's like, but anyway. So my point is that 1,000 Suns, I didn't feel like they were doing that. I didn't feel like they were like, hey, let's make this like industrial, like electronic-y sounding album. I felt like they were. I really felt like that album was focused, like the last one was focused on the songwriting, and they just wrote really, really good songs, and they're just really well crafted, really engaging songs. And this one, like my theory is that they did this whole return to form thing was because they wanted to just let fans know that they're still the Linkin Park that that their fans started out with them and that they grew to love. But I'm curious to see where they go from here, because now that they've established themselves as such a diverse sounding band, which they weren't before, I'd be curious to see if they were like, this was a lazy album that they just kind of churned out so to make sure that they didn't lose all their fans, and then who knows, maybe they'll go back and do something totally experimental on the next one, which I hope they do. And that kind of leads me into the next one. In this moment, their new album Blood, which kind of has a lot of these elements of what we were talking about. Like, they definitely wanted to do something a little bit different, and so they went a little bit more electronic. Like, they added a lot of drum tracks and stuff. So they did a lot with Maria Brink's voice electronically. They put a lot of effects on it and things, stuff they hadn't really done in the past. And kind of at first glance, I was like, another band is going down this path because they want to do something different, so they're putting out, just going that trendy route of not really experimenting, but going with just something that's different for their sound. But in the end, now that I listened to it a good half dozen times, I find it to be a really good album, not because of the sound changes and everything, which are fine. Like, they work for what I think they were trying to accomplish, but a lot more of it I think is the songwriting. Again, I think some of the songs in there are not their best work overall, but some of them were a little bit simplistic, especially in terms of the lyrical content, like the one where she's just screaming "shut up" the whole song. But I also find it to be an incredibly incendiary album. Like, there's a lot of interesting kind of backwards lyricism in terms of what you would expect a song to be about, where the song Blood, for instance, where she's talking about
exactly that song. It's amazing how I hate it's like, what was it, I love you for all these negative things you do to me,
and I hate you for all the good things.
That's kind of cool. I really like that dynamic.
Yeah, I find that to be really, really interesting, and I'm curious to kind of get to know the album better lyrically, because I feel like she had a lot of interesting stuff to say, not necessarily in terms of the subject matter, because she's obviously talking about relationships and things, but the way that she's handling it, I almost found Brand New's Deja Entendu, or however you say it, where it, on the surface it sounds like a very, very sweet crooning, love songs and things, but if you really listen to what he's saying, it's really hurtful, really dark, kind of manipulative, So it's not nice stuff to say, but just in terms of experimenting and playing with audience expectations, I find that to be really interesting, and I think that's kind of what in this moment Maria is kind of stepping it up in that regard, and overall I thought the album was just it's a really solid album for them, and I think they're an interesting case too, because kind of like Linkin Park, where you can't really peg them as this kind of band. I thought almost like the Deftones too, where I think they played it really smart, and they were really aware of what they were doing, where they were all right, we put out our first kind of metalcore album, but they had a really dynamic sound. Maria was a screamer and a singer, and that they were thrashy, but they also were kind of chuggy, and they kind of they had some new metal elements, and they had metalcore elements, and they had they had solos, so they had all those kind of pieces. They weren't too much pigeonholed into one thing, and then they put out The Dream, which was in my eyes, was a total departure from Beautiful Tragedy, because it was almost not heavy, in the metalcore sense. I mean, it had, it was very guitar driven, but the songs were a lot more poppier, I guess. I mean, not like poppy, but like they were just poppier sounding and had a poppier vibe, and they weren't as like dark and aggressive and like ferocious. And then they put out Star-Crossed Wasteland, which was kind of like a mixture of the two. I thought it had elements of the dream and more of the metalcore elements of Beautiful Tragedy. They definitely amped it up a little bit though, especially with songs like Gun Show and like Iron Army, which are like really heavy and like really aggressive and just like straight up metal songs, and they had a little bit of the other dynamic going on. They had some guest singers, and like, so what I think is interesting about them and bands like Linkin Park and Deftones is that you can't really say like, oh, they're that kind of band, like they're a new metal band or they're a metalcore band. Like, they've been putting out albums that are like just different enough that still sound like them, but they're different enough whereas they're not like repetitive or easy to kind of pin down. So I thought Blood was an interesting move for them because it takes things in a new direction again, and it might not all be perfect. I think that they're just really open that they can make art in any way they want now, very much like the Deftones, which is why I kind of think that they're like the Deftones of metalcore, because they don't have to stick to any kind of format or structure or sound or vibe. Like, they can do whatever they want, and I think it's going to be good because they're always going to be like very courageous about it. So that's I obviously had a lot more to say about that than the other ones, but Blood and them as a band, they really strike me, and I think they're definitely up there in my like favorite list, and with the Deftones and Machine Head and stuff like that, because I think they're a really versatile band. I'm really excited about that they're, still making music. So, all right, what did you guys think about Blood?
I liked it. I thought it was a good solid, like you. I thought it was a good solid album. There were some songs that were kind of like, all right, throwaway albums. It kind of compared to, maybe not so much, but a little bit kind of like what I thought of All Hope Is Gone, Slipknot, where there's some stuff that's just fantastic, and there's some songs that are like good. You can get into them, but they're like they're not kneeling level like throwaway songs, but they're not their aim material. I felt like this album. I think that their last album, more than their other two albums, I feel like the songwriting throughout their albums has improved greatly. One of the things seeing too many artists steady up of songwriting throughout their albums. Second one, I feel like the song quality was much better, more confident. Although it was like this poppy metal, it was a different sound. It's hard to put a finger on. I bet there are people, music critics out there, who can put a label on it. But in the third album, I felt like to me that's almost. I don't think that the third album is my favorite. It's heavy, and they had a really great feeling song with the last song on it, and it was a fantastic album. I felt like, again, this album had it didn't have the theme the last album did. It was like a themed album so much, and it felt the one downside I felt, the album was a bit hodgepodgey.
Yeah,
I felt it took a lot of elements of the last album, of the previous three, and put it together with a bit of that electronica kind of sound, which didn't, or electronica is not the right word, like you said, the drum tracks and stuff, and a bit of industrial sounds or vocals, or I don't know how you label it, but all in all, I thought that was very solid. I really got into it. That song was like Comanche. That was pretty damn heavy, and she has a lot of songs that are like they're trying to get to the touching, like very emotional, visceral songs, which didn't hook me as much as the more emotional songs of their previous albums. I felt it was sort of like they're trying to do that vibe again, but they were still really good. Even if something didn't hook me so much, I still was into it. I still liked. Mm-hmm. So all in all, I still like the third album a bit more. It's a good album. Definitely worth having. Chris?
No, I agree with Dave. For whatever reason, I think I like Star-Crossed Wasteland the best. But I did like just the really cathartic, visceral nature that Blood had to it. I mean, like you were saying, Dan, I have to give the lyrics another listen because, on some of them, the first ones, I was like, wow, this is really disturbing.
Yeah.
But it had a point to what it was trying to bring up, and just the negative aspects of a relationship and the way you can like cling to that stuff even when that you shouldn't. So I'm just really excited to see what I hope they keep going. I mean, so far, like I said, even though I don't like this album as much as the third one, they keep going up, and I hope they keep doing that. But I really did hate the video for Blood, so.
I haven't seen it. What?
This is just totally personal opinion, but it reminded me of Lady Gaga.
Really?
And it's like, Maria, you don't need to try to be like Gaga.
I know, right? Well, she's almost like the dark Gaga or something, and I mean, she's very theatrical.
Yeah.
She does have that theatrical side to her, yeah.
I mean, there was a video of her on YouTube of like doing the zombie walk in I don't know where Boston or something, but she's got that side to her. And are there any other albums that came out this summer that you guys would like to touch on, or should we move on?
There are certain songs of that upcoming albums I'd like to talk about. We talked about the new Vendetta Red songs; they're fantastic. Also, have we talked about the new VOD song?
Well, go ahead, talk about them.
Loveless. It's pretty damn good. It's a bit more standard hardcore as opposed to the craziness like, let's say, Enemy or some of their infrared kind of stuff, but it's really good. And that video for it was very minimalist hardcore, but
well, I'll post it on the show notes. But PRP again had a really good review. PRP is really, really harsh on bands, but they love this new album, which I thought was interesting in terms of the song, whatever it was called, their single that they put out, because I didn't think the song was that, like, I thought it was good, but I didn't think it was like...
Which one? Enemy or Loveless?
Set to Fail or Born to Fail or something like that. The one they had the video for.
Oh.
Which the video was awful. Like, why do bands waste their money, or why do labels waste their money on making these videos of bands just like one guy playing his instrument per shot? What's the point of that? I don't.
A footy against the wall, just kind of like looking pissed off. I mean, yeah.
I gotta say, a total aside, but kind of related to this, is that at the opening of my school the other day, we watched a video to kind of get teachers inspired and things about. Well, actually, no, I think the kids watched it too. Yeah, they did. It was an assembly, and it was a band called OK Go, which I don't know if you guys have heard of. I've heard their name, but I never heard their music. They're like an indie rock band.
I've heard of them.
I think I've heard of the name. I don't know if I've heard of the actual music.
The music was indie stuff. It was fine, but the video was amazing. It was a Rube Goldberg thing, like a machine, where you it's all about like making the most difficult way to do like a simple action, like press a button, but it involves like a ball rolling and dominoes and tracks and trains and water and paint and like all this crazy stuff just to like press a button. And they just did this video involving like this. It was one long take, and it was their entire song, and it was this incredibly, phenomenally intricate and convoluted Rube Goldberg machine that just did all this crazy stuff, and it obviously had this huge production team to put it together. And that was a music video for their song, and I just thought that was amazing, because music videos are just such a wasted thing these days. I mean, who's gonna see that VOD video except for the diehard fans are gonna watch it on YouTube when the PRP or Blabbermouth or somebody announces that it's released. Other than that, like, they're gonna play it in Europe on some Europe metal channel somewhere. But I don't know. I just think it's such a wasted opportunity to like waste that film on shooting bands like standing there. Okay, but anyway, yeah, I thought the song was really good. It was really solid, but maybe it was a video that dampened it for me a little bit. But I don't like singles because I want to hear. I feel like in context of the album, because like a lot of songs, like songs before or after, can like give songs like a different kind of context and more of a momentum,
Yeah.
But when you hear them as a single, it doesn't always have the same. Because I remember the first time I heard Southbound, and I wasn't a VOD fan back then, but I just thought that song was horrible. And then then listening to the whole album from Bliss of Devastation, I love that song, and so anyway, Dave, you had the floor.
Yes, it was a good song, but I felt like I just want to hear this album. I love the song Enemy. That was great, but again, we'll see how this comes. I mean, it's got great reviews. I feel like there's going to be a bit of Blood Simple sound into it, for a lot of Imprint.
Yeah.
You combine Blood Simple with Imprint, they got some of the best fucking hardcore ever made, man. So
Totally. Dave, you wanted to talk about Vendetta Red?
yeah, if anybody out there is still a Vendetta Red fan, they have a new album coming out, which was supposed to come out somewhere around July or August, which there's still no date for yet. They have two songs out. Do you remember the names, Dan? I can't remember them right off the top of my head.
One is Close to Me, and the other one is, I think it's called Stay Red.
Yeah, Stained Red. It's great hearing their stuff not seen from like how the second album was, which was with the Red Death, but having just great. I mean,
I always said that Vendetta Red was like the Deftones of emo.
Yeah.
You know, that in that they are a band that you can't really quite, pin down of like they fit into a genre, but then they defy it at the same time. And I think they're like artists more than they're just a band, and I think they're just amazing songwriters, and they just do everything right. I don't really know what else to say about them.
It's like they are to emo what let's say Cannibal Corpse is to standard metal or poppy metal. I mean, they're like
yeah.
With their vibe, they're like death metal emo. I don't know. They're just I just love it. I love it.
Okay, yeah, because they're so like dark and demented.
But they're not folky. They're just like not standard poppy punk sound, but like we kind of grouped into there.
Yeah.
Great.
All right, well, let's talk about some concerts then, since this is our summer 2012 roundup. I believe, like, to start off the summer, both of you guys saw Against Me.
Yes.
In different places. So tell us about that. And
Buffalo had all these free shows at the waterfront. There's really no good artists playing except for I missed the Boston, unfortunately, and Against Me played like the first show. Playing before the Cult, which I didn't stick around to see. It was awesome. I mean, their latest stuff is like a groovy, like hardcore punk band. They are. It's like, I heard them on the radio when Teenage Anarchist came out, and they're like, wow, it's one of those like anomaly songs of like, this artist is too good to be just a regular hit band on the radio. What is this? Who is this? But I really want to know who it was, and I literally started listening to their albums verbatim when that show came about, and I don't know, when they came on, it was just awesome. I mean, they sounded just like they did in their albums. I mean, they were just great live acts. It was an outdoor show. It was extremely loud for an outdoor show. I didn't wear earplugs as I usually do at indoor shows, but not for outdoor usually. My ears ringing for several days afterwards. It was loud, but the sound quality was great. The art, everybody in the band was into it. I mean,
how did the crowd react? Were people there for them?
Oh yeah, a decent amount were. I mean, the place was filled. I mean, I'd say as many if not more were there for them than for the Cult. I mean, the place was full. There was a mosh pit. I met a guy I knew. I saw a guy I knew there, and we just hung out for a minute watching them, and I just had a great time. Fantastic show.
Chris, how was your show, and where was it?
Mine was at the Fillmore in Silver Spring, so it was an indoor show. And it was definitely like, I didn't stay for the Cold either, just for timing, but, getting the CDs, they were really good. But then just seeing them live, I was just kind of blown away. They're definitely one of a band that is like 10 times better live and just very engaging.
And I think it's worth noting that this is their tour that they're on. I think they were in the midst of it when Laura Grace, formerly Tom Gable, right?
Yep.
Came out as a transsexual. And did that play into the show at all, or was that not even an issue?
At my show, I don't know about Dave's show, but in my show it was, but nothing but in a positive way, because there was just like people had like homemade signs, Laura, we love you and stuff like that, and just like there was definitely a vibe of just kind of love and support for the band. And even you could I was in the bathroom afterwards, and this one guy came out and just made kind of this nervous joke type thing where another person was just like, "Oh, shut up, dude! It was a great show."
All right.
And it was just it wasn't out of malice, but it was just kind of out of whoa, I don't know, this is outside of my worldview. I don't quite know how to deal with it. But like the mutual consensus was just it was a great show. So
cool. Well, the next show that I believe that we have in common was the System of a Down in DC, and that one is a touchy subject for me, especially. I'm sure for you guys a little bit, because it was supposed to be the Deftones and System of a Down, and we completely missed the Deftones, almost to the T, where we walked in just as they had left stage. Circumstances of that and lessons that we learned that I learned that night were, number one, I need to start paying attention to ticket time, which never had been an issue before. I don't know about everybody else out there, but in my experience and other people I've talked to, including you guys and then other people too, is that I've never known a show to start at the time it says on the ticket. The doors may open, but I don't think I've ever been to a show that started at like 7 o'clock or whatever. It says that usually they open the doors around that time, or maybe a little earlier, and then they meander around for however long, and some opening band finally goes on. But I mean, and also because this was and the Deftones, I don't know about System, but the Deftones are known to only bring like one band on the road with them, But it's pretty rare, actually, I think, when the Deftones tour with more than one band. But these are two major acts, and like I've never seen like major acts touring together with no opening bands. That just blew my mind. Like I've never seen that before. So yeah, it said show started at 8 o'clock. We were out with friends, and we were just weren't too concerned about the time. And then we walked in at about 8:50, thinking that we've missed the whole waiting around for nothing time and opening band time. So hopefully the Deftones are going on soon. And they had just walked off stage. They went on right at 8 o'clock. They played for 45 minutes and left. And that was like I'm still super bummed about that. I'm so disappointed, because I don't know if you guys saw that, but the Deftones are doing a headlining tour coming up, and they're not coming anywhere around me. The closest they're coming to is Maryland, playing Ram's Head, but it's on a weeknight, so I cannot go to that. And there's one in Philly. And Dave, I don't know about any New York. I don't know any. I forgot to look for that, but you might want to take a look at Deftones.com. Chris, you'll probably be able to make a couple of them.
Two things I'll say. I need to pick less fancy restaurants.
No, see, that wasn't your fault at all, though. Like,
no, dude, seriously. I picked the restaurant. And secondly, like what you were saying about the weirdness of the timing, it struck me later that this is the Verizon Center, and not to be all, like, I don't know, whatever, but, like, the Verizon Center is the most clockwork of the man place you could probably go to see a concert.
That's a good point.
So yeah, they would get everything down to the second on clockwork of getting people in, getting people out. So
that's a good point. They probably they don't mess around with that. That didn't even occur to me,
Neither me either.
Lesson learned, but I just it's just really disappointing. I wish. When have there ever not been an opening band for major? I just don't get that.
There's at least one medium or smaller sized band open for larger acts.
I don't know what this says about the state of, I guess, the current like metal or all across the hard metal scene, but in Verizon Center's mind, Deftones was the opening band for System.
Yeah, I guess so.
I don't know. I am curious to see like if the other venues they played, if they were like all like large stadiums like Verizon Center.
Yeah.
And if not, were there any others like other bands on the ticket of other shows in the tour?
Yeah,
I don't know.
But luckily though, we did get to see all of System of a Down, which for Dave and myself was the second time. The first time we saw them was way back in like, I think it was like 99 or 2000. They were nobodies, and they were opening up for Fear Factory. And before that, I didn't like them at all. I thought they sounded stupid. It's because I had no idea like the context of them and their Armenian background and everything, and their political views and Serge's like quirkiness and everything. But when we saw them, they just like totally blew me away. I mean, what's his name? The guitarist was like painted silver, and he had like a white Iceman and he was totally crazy. And the bassist was, oh no, I think maybe the bassist was painted silver. I don't remember, one of them. And they were just so insane. And Sarge had like the huge bushy hair and the makeup and that weird Armenian jacket thing that he was wearing, and they were just so odd and like so bizarre and so cool. And they put on such a great show at opening up for, they almost stole the show for Fear Factory, I thought, that night. So that was at the 930 Club in D.C. That's a long time ago. And so it was interesting seeing them again. So now they're all wearing just like jeans and t-shirt, they're just like whatever. They were definitely not as theatrical, at least with that kind of stuff. But their light show was really pretty intricate, and I liked how they had the big screen or cloth up that kind of silhouetted them for the first song.
Hey guys, everybody in the band and System is of Armenian descent. I didn't know that.
Oh, you didn't? Yeah, I did know that.
I thought Surge. I didn't really.
The problem for seeing them for me this time was I was so bummed out by not seeing the Deftones that it pretty much ruined my experience with System. I just had a hard time like getting into it because they put on such a great show, but I was just so bummed out. But I was really struck by for them, just seeing them again. I didn't realize that they were really that popular still, so that was cool. Like people were really into it, and people were singing along, and that was great. And like they, I thought they just put on a really good show, and they played a really good cross section of their music. They played pretty much all of Toxicity, and they played they really actually only played a couple songs from their first album, but then they played a good amount of everything else. And the thing that struck me the most about the way they sounded was their guitar. I thought was like some of the heaviest, like most fullest guitar sound that I've heard in a live setting ever. I don't know what it was, but it just, especially for one guitarist, I thought it was like really, really thick. I was just really impressed by that. So that's kind of all I got. Otherwise, I thought it was a really good show, but I was only half there. I was wistful for the Deftones. So, Chris, what did you think?
It was my first time seeing them, so I think after realizing, oh crap, no Deftones, I was just like, okay, I'm just gonna kind of put that aside for the time being and just see some bands, seeing them live, and it was just really, really intense, really fun. I definitely wish I had been on the floor, because they're definitely kind of a band you want to see more up close and not in stadium seating. But I almost wanted to get one of my coworkers at the library is this I don't know 40, 50 something year old British lady, and we bonded over Queen. I almost wanted to give her some power to check out System, because that was the only kind of similar experience I could come up with after seeing System live. Was this probably would offend so many other listeners, but Queen, that's the only other band I could equate with them afterwards.
You might also want to recommend to her the My Chemical Romance, though, especially Black Parade. That's very Queen-esque.
The theatricality, yeah.
Dave, did you enjoy the show? The part that we saw?
Very much. And the whole time we were seeing System, I honestly didn't know who was coming on next.
Yeah, I texted both of you guys, and Chris got them. We had a whole conversation, but then Dave, you must just not got my text, because I told you
some of them. I think it's the ones that for some reason I didn't get the text that we missed that phone for later. System, after they played for an hour and a half, I kind of realized that I didn't think Deftones was coming on. But even so, it sucks not seeing Deftones. I've seen in the past, but I haven't seen System in so long, and they've had, when we saw them, there was one album out, they were brand new to the scene. And it was, especially after a long hiatus, it was awesome seeing them. They weren't as theatrical as I thought they would be. They're not that they ever worked too much, but they were just always weird. And you think there'd be something more weird they would be doing, but they didn't. But it seems like the live acts, they wanted to be more straightforward. They can dress weird, and my assessment of them, they do metal the way metal is not supposed to be done. That's what always makes them, a lot of bands, especially a lot of when metalcore started to get really hackneyed, it was fans were let's do metal. You know, they're not like, we like hard rock. Let's just make music that shows our influence. No, they're more like, let's do metal and speed metal and
a pre-programmed idea of what it was supposed to be, which was nothing original.
This one was just like so themselves. It was just so cool. It's like, and listening to seeing the show, I really realized one reason it's so cool is that they almost every song has a hook. I mean, they're very breakdown oriented, very dynamic, but they combine that with this goofiness and this groove, and this it makes their in the past I haven't appreciated their sound as much. It's been up and down with them a little bit in the past, and you know, I appreciate their angst and and it was great. Their live sound was fantastic, and I didn't realize how much the guitarist vocals for this theme.
Apparently, he's like kind of the main songwriter of the band.
Yeah, or some albums he's been more or less. I think the last two he was more. So I got into it. I loved it.
It was just a very solid show. Like there wasn't really much extra.
No.
There wasn't much like pizzazz. It was just like them rocking, and that was interesting. Because you'd expect them to be a little bit more. But maybe they're trying to reach a wider audience, you know, and maybe they've been doing that for a while. I don't know, because we haven't been seeing them live. But last major show that we have in common was Chris and I saw Soulfly in Springfield, Virginia, formerly at the club formerly known as Jack's, now known as Empire, which I'd always heard about growing up in the DC metro area. People, our friend Jason that I mentioned earlier, would always talk about going to Jack's to see probably like Soulfly and other bands that would play there. But I think it was mostly like a death metal club, and it was a little bit too far past DC to have like a weeknight commute to. So I never ended up going there. And it was a nice little club. It was very small. Dave, it was kind of like the Thunderdome in Baltimore, like that size.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was like big enough to have like a national act, but like not like a major national act. And speaking of which, so what struck me initially about the Soulfly show, there was like a bunch of opening bands that Chris and I missed because we got there pretty late, and the last band was a band called Insight, which I think it has somebody in the band, probably the singer, I think is related to Max, like it's a nephew or something, because they always tour with Soulfly. They've been touring with Soulfly since the past decade, and I don't know if they tour with anybody else. But I'll get back to Insight in a second. But I was surprised, but also kind of not surprised by the size of the crowd. That like the last time we saw Soulfly, I thought it was a pretty good crowd. I don't think it was sold out. That was at Record Theater in like 2005, right? For the Dark Ages tour, and I think they were still a pretty popular band back then. But I feel like Soulfly, I don't know, something the past several albums, like they've just lost. Or I guess the only people still holding on are their main fan base, and I think Max was maybe not purposefully, but it just kind of naturally was. A huge portion of his fan base was Sepultura originators, and then they came on board with Soulfly, and they were cool with, especially people that like Roots a lot. I think were big Soulfly converts, but then I don't know if it's just like the metal scene is becoming less mainstream or what, but like it was just not a lot of people there, and it was pretty thin. It felt more like a local show, and that kind of bummed me out a little bit for Soulfly and Max, who's such a legend, but it didn't seem to slow them down at all. But anyway, going back a little bit, Insight I thought was pretty terrible, but they always have been. Every time I've seen them open for Soulfly, which has been like a dozen times or something, don't really have much to say about them, except that I thought it was funny that the guitar player looked exactly like he was trying to look like a young Dimebag Darrell, and complete with like a Pantera shirt and a signature Dimebag Washburn Lightning guitar that he was playing. Even though they sounded nothing like Pantera, but I just like that guy was obviously a Dime fan, so whatever. I don't even. But then Soulfly, I thought they were great. Like they were pretty much everything that I've always come to love and respect about Max, and they sounded awesome, and they mostly played new stuff off of the past couple albums. They played a couple, ones you'd expect, like Eye for an Eye and like Frontlines and things. But at this point in their career, I'm just kind of wondering like if Soulfly is going to keep going, because I feel like they've kind of plateaued like around Dark Ages, and now they're just like going along, and it's just very much. And Max, like, I don't feel like he's put out really any very original sounding material in a while. And we've talked about Max a lot on the show, so I won't get too much into it. But otherwise, in general, I thought it was a really good show. And one thing I really appreciated about it was, for the first time, and maybe it was because it was such a small venue and such a loose crowd, that Max kind of felt the freedom to like screw around a little bit. And they played some covers, like they played Walk, and they played, I don't know, like some AC/DC, and they played like Black Sabbath, and they seemed like they were really having a lot of fun. And and the other members, by the way, they of course, you still got that guy's amazing as always. Their guitar player who was in El Nino before, that guy's quite a prodigy. And then Tony Campos, the former bass player from Static X, that was kind of cool. He seemed like he was having fun. And the drummer, like, I don't know about you, Chris, but I thought that guy was like non-existent. I mean, he was amazing, super precise, and like he was like really talented, but he just seemed like he could have cared less about being there. He was like, didn't interact with the crowd at all. Like when he did his drum solo, I felt like he was about to fall asleep. I don't know what that guy's problem was. Maybe he was just in it for the paycheck, but
just from my height, I really couldn't see the drummer, but
no. What other highlights from the show? I mean, it was fun that we were able to be right up on the front, and there was no security or anything because it's such a small club.
That
so it was
fun.
Just
yeah.
Up at the bar. I had like Max's and the what's the guitar player's name? That really bugs me. Mark Rizzo. Mark Rizzo's like.
Oh yeah.
His scalp sweat was hitting me in the face, and that's kind of cool. Those guys were idols to me back in high school, or at least Max was. So that was really cool. And and otherwise, like it was fun being up the front, except until that like super crazy drunk Mohawk shirtless guy started to try to make his stake at the front there, and started shoving everybody, to either side, and we're all like holding on, like we were here first, and God, drunk metalheads. He never gained his ground really. He stayed there, but he never really elbowed us all the way, so that was good. So what do you think of this?
I mean, no matter, I definitely agree. Dark Ages has been the peak for me, but just, this is one of my second time seeing them, and I wish I've seen them more, because just from those two shows, it doesn't matter how much their albums peak, they still put on a great live show. So
yeah.
And I don't know what Max is going to end up doing. He's going to keep continuing Soulfly, or whether it would be better for him to start a new project. But as long as he keeps doing music, I'll keep listening to it and going to the shows. So.
Agreed.
I just want to say, I think I originally reviewed last Soulfly's album not very well, and it's really growing on me.
Oh, do you like it now?
Yes, I like it now.
Cool.
Nothing can beat the last several albums can beat Dark Ages.
So, Chris, you saw a couple other shows this summer, Jay Brannan and Joyce Manor, right?
Yep.
Did you want to talk about those real quick?
Jay Brannan is definitely outside of the harder music experience.
Meh.
I don't know, I've kind of equated him as being Joe Matranga's gay New York cousin. He's just a singer-songwriter from New York who got a kind of weird, quirky break in a movie that his music, and he had a live music solo in the movie. He has an interesting balance where his music stylistically is very kind of simple folk guitar based, but he has just very witty, self-deprecating, honest lyrics, which is a really interesting counterbalance. And I think I've seen 3 shows of his now, and they're just always really fun. He's very engaging. Like, a quarter of the time he'll stop the show, just kind of talk with the audience. He does great covers of, he's a skinny white boy who does great covers of Straight Outta Compton. And he just added Nicki Minaj's Super Bass to his cover repertoire.
Huh.
It's just an interesting, unique experience for his live shows, definitely.
What was the venue and everything? And did he play solo, or do you have a band or anything?
No, he always plays. He always plays solo.
Okay.
He's definitely an artist who YouTube has enhanced a lot. He's very active on YouTube.
Okay.
Putting up like live videos. The venue I saw him at was it was the U Street Music Hall. I've seen him at 9:30 and Ram's Head previously.
Okay. How was Joyce Manor?
Joyce Manor, they were real. That was just kind of like a almost like blast from the past nostalgic show. It really reminded me of kind of going to shows at high school.
Okay.
It was at the Black Cat in D.C., but it wasn't on the main stage. It was in the side stage.
Yeah, that's where I saw Jonah once.
Room where the stage is basically in the corner. So there was a full-on mosh pit going, crowd surfing. So everybody was just like letting loose. And Max Levine Ensemble and Algernon Carter Waldron. I know I'm getting the last part mangled wrong. But they opened for them, and the middle band, Algernon, it was actually their last show ever. Apparently the lead singer has gotten a new job and is having a kid.
Yeah, that was a very like anticlimactic like way to end his career as a musician. Like,
yeah, I had never even heard of them or heard any of their music before that night. But and then Joyce Manor, they were just really. I mean, it's very funny because the thing that made me pick their album up originally was their latest album. The cover is just the name of the band against a white backdrop, but the O is in a blue circle. And I thought it had some kind of drums connection.
Yeah.
So I was just like, oh, let me check this out. But of course, I don't. As far as I can tell, they have no connection whatsoever. But it's just kind of like a new, refreshing, old school punk band combined with, I don't know, like more, I guess you could say, almost emo indie-ish lyrics. So it was just a really fun show, and the whole crowd just got totally into it. I got thrown out of the mosh pit in like 2 seconds flat. But it was just a really fun show.
That's cool. I want to go to more shows like that. I haven't been to like those big fun shows for a long time. I guess I've been going too many metal shows and not enough whatever the kids are listening to these days. Let's talk about movies a little bit. Let's move on from the music, even though we can mention the music of the movies if we want. But they're the big three, even though lots of big movies came out this summer, of course. But there are three that I really wanted to touch on, if you guys don't mind, because they all had a different. They all hit me in different ways, and I thought they were worth the conversation. The first one was Prometheus, which I don't know if it did as well as was expected, especially because it was supposed to be connected with Alien and everything, and Ridley Scott being the director. But that movie really stuck with me, even though it came out at the beginning of the summer, and it was obviously very controversial, and there was a lot of talk about like how connected it was going to be with Alien, and like was it a direct prequel or not, and Ridley Scott like kept saying it wasn't going to be, but then of course there was that supposed like twist ending or surprise ending, which I wasn't surprised about at all, because when the girl like aborted or had the C-section for the face hugger, I was like, oh, there's a face hugger. It's gonna get somebody at some point. Like, and then so then I knew we were gonna see an alien, and I knew that I didn't think it was gonna be one of the space jockeys, but I like the fact that happened. Like, people were all over the internet and in reviews and podcasts. People were like, what was with that crazy twist ending? That was so stupid. I didn't like, why do they? I didn't think it was a twist at all. It was like there's so much we could say about it. I mean, there's so much to talk about and so much to debate and try to figure out. And it's like talking about Lost or something. But in the end, like it's like Lost because it was co-written by Damon Lindelof, of course. But it's a movie that had huge, major problems. It was like big plot holes, if you could look at it like that. My biggest problem with it was the characters were complete crap. They were like the most lazy, empty, one-dimensional characters. And some of the lines in there, like when the guys like the captain of the ship is talking to Charlize Theron, and he's just like, "Are you a robot?" And it's just like the dumbest delivery of lines and just so bad. There's another line that the robot, that the android David says later in the movie. I can't remember what it was now, but it was just awful. But the thing is that like none of that bothered me at all, because the movie itself, I thought like the plot and the themes were so compelling. And I only saw it once, I gotta admit that. So maybe just seeing it once, like maybe if I saw it again I'd hate it. I don't know. But the one time I saw it, I was totally compelled. I was like, this movie is more of like an reading a really thick essay or something, as opposed to being like a piece of entertaining material. And I kind of equate it to listening to Eminem, who I don't always like or agree with everything that he says. Sometimes it downright disgusts me, the things that he talks about, but it's always compelling. It's shocking, it gets your attention. There's so much hyperbole, and like it's just so in your face that like you can't help but like at least pay attention to it, if not enjoy it just for its compelling nature. And I felt like that about Prometheus, where like it was like disgusting and violent, and it was like nonsensical, and things happened for like seemingly no reason, and the characters did things for no reason and said things for no reason, and like, but it just didn't matter, because I just wanted to see what was going to happen next. And like just the bigger picture stuff I thought was so interesting about the essence of mankind, and like why were we put here, and like were we just part of like some bigger scheme that we were just like a expendable afterthought to like these space jockeys that had a much bigger plan for things and whatever. I found it to be like and also this is the only movie that I've seen in 3D so far that really wowed me, and not because of like the pop out effect or anything, but just because the landscape and the photography was so gorgeous. I think they shot it mostly in Iceland. It was just so stark and so bleak and so the wide angle lenses they use, and I just thought it was just gorgeous to behold. And like the sets, people complained about the sets for some reason, and I thought they were bad, but like there was only really 3 sets, right? There was like the outdoor area, the spaceship, and then the indoor of the bunker thing, and that was it. I mean, but people were like about the sets being really like lame and borrowed from other things, but I thought they were like gorgeous. I don't know. So Prometheus, what did you think, Chris?
I admired what it was trying to do at times more than I liked or admired the movie as a whole. I initially liked, like I said, the whole epic kind of question of humanity's origin. It definitely had the flavor of the old school science fiction pulp stuff, and definitely the visuals and the landscape were amazing. I mean, I definitely think one of the downfalls came with, it definitely felt like Ridley Scott's original new idea shoved into, let's tie this back with the alien stuff.
Unnecessary, right?
Right. Like, it really should have just been its own unique, different story instead of a prequel to the Alien movies. But one of the best stum-ups that I think came from the Patton Oswalt, the comedian.
Oh, yeah.
An actor, where he did a different video. It was a video of him completely eviscerating Star Wars The Phantom Menace, where he basically sums it up at the end. You have Darth Vader, this completely iconic, amazing imagery character of evil, and then we find out through this prequel that he's just a whiny teenager and a weirdly happy kid. It's the same thing with the aliens. Like, the aliens are really hardcore. I don't need to know why, how, and why they're created. They're more interesting as just being these aliens that look really creepy and can kill you 50 million ways flat.
Well, and it's kind of scarier, not the mystery about them.
Yeah.
Like, not knowing where they came from makes it, which is my argument about like the whole like ruining of like Michael Myers and making him into a serial killer, like I talked about in the first episode of the podcast, where Rob Zombie took him and just made him into like a generic serial killer, or any movie like the Saw movies where they like Jigsaw became this like stupid, like punchline of a serial killer, where like the whole idea of like somebody locking 2 people in a room. I thought the first movie I thought was really interesting, and then like not knowing why they were there, or what their connection was, or who did this to them, made it really interesting until, in my opinion, like saw what could be completely irrelevant. Like once we found out who the killer was, and then it's like, I don't know. It gave too much. It gave you just gave you too much. It took away the scare factor, because isn't fear mostly derived from what the unknown, like what you don't know?
Right.
Why people are so afraid of death and things, like because it's the unknown, and people are scared of the dark because they can't see what's out there, and and I totally agree with you on that one. Like the whole prequel idea, to something that was originally so scary kind of takes away its steam, but. And that was kind of one thing I appreciated about the movie, was I thought Ridley Scott did that on. I think Ridley Scott made it on purpose to be a discussion movie. Like I think he was trying to make it more than just simple entertainment, and I appreciated that. Even though like obviously it worked to various degrees depending on your perspective and context. But Dave, what'd you think?
I was into it the first time I saw it. I saw it twice. And it was. I think it both times. Mostly for the return to the Ridley Scott alien type feel, and the sort of industrial sci-fi, or that like late '80s kind of noir vibe of sci-fi, which I love so much. I think it was the best sci-fi ever, but at least with cinematic. But when I came to think of it, it wasn't like great. It was all the whole discussion of the origins of the universe, and or origins of life, and supposedly leading the guy was kind of like, I didn't really care.
Really?
I just wanted to be crazy, and then that was entertaining enough, and I don't know, as far as it went, it was a thriller. It was kind of see it and now you don't really think about things. You're just kind of like, oh, so that's where aliens come from. That's where aliens came from,
Yeah.
That's kind of cool, and okay. It wasn't great. It was worth seeing for the cinematics and just the feel, but the atmosphere of it. But all in all, it wasn't like anything breakthrough, so I'm sort of neutral on it.
Yeah.
Two last things on it. I was really disappointed at the end when the face hugger bonded with the alien creator, because I honestly thought it was going to end up being that it bonded with us, with a human. Like, I thought that would explain the humanoid structure to the aliens in the later ones.
Yeah, I thought that was the thing. I thought, like, with alien, like, I thought that the point of the aliens was that they took on characteristics of the beings that they gestated with. But, I mean, I guess the space jockey was humanoid as well, so...
Yeah. And secondly, have you guys seen Dark City yet?
No, I haven't.
Next time the three of us get in a room, we're watching that.
You're not the only one to say that. I know I need to see it. The next one I want to touch on is it might be a little controversial, but I think it'll make for good conversation. But I gotta get it out there to the world how I felt about Brave. But I'm gonna let you guys go first. And I've been stewing on this for a long time, and I didn't see it again. So this is all based on my one time viewing, but I almost feel like I don't need to see it again to go. But why don't you guys talk about Brave first? So Dave, how'd you feel about Brave?
Brave was, the hook for that movie was the setting and the fantastic music. It seemed like it was going to be fantastic, and ended up being just kind of mediocre. Like, I don't know, something about that. The mother turning the bear thing didn't just seem to do it. I felt like there was going to be, you know what? So sometimes it happens in a movie where you see the preview, you see the trailer, and you feel like there's going to be this bigger adventure. It's like you can make an adventure in some other, it's longer, all stuff's going to happen, and it ends up being just this more contained story, and you're just kind of like, oh, that's it. That's how I felt with this. I was like, I thought some big thing was going to change when she, was cursed or something, or changed her fate, and there's going to be this big, huge adventure goes from there. With all these places, all this stuff happens, like Odyssey. And what happened was, her mother turned into a f***ing bear. She had to remedy it, and there we were. Okay, it's kind of the full self-contained thing. And a lot of, and it's not true to the beauty of a lot of the. Actually, this is a theme that runs throughout the good Pixar films, where it starts out with a small plot, and then these things like blossom from there. It's this huge adventure. just think of any of the ones that are the notable ones. This didn't seem to have that. It seemed like it had the potential. That's why I was so excited when I saw the previous work, but it didn't go there. It was so self-contained, I felt. And just, I wanted I wanted the Lord of the Rings. I just wanted this adventure to blossom from how it was set up, and it didn't fulfill my expectations of a live story. So it was kind of forgettable,
Chris?
I liked it more than you guys did. To me, it was a pretty good movie, which in the Pixar pantheon equates to being a good Pixar movie. I don't think it was one of the best ones, but to me, it just took a kind of classical fairy tale structure and applied that kind of logic to it. Just with there's all kinds of greater symbolism cast upon it, with, I think, definitely with everything going on with women's rights and politics these days. That definitely kind of, in some ways, for both better and for worse, overshadowed that. Since the main character was the first Pixar heroine. But to me, at the core, it took a classical fairy tale structure and did the Pixar mold on it, where it was about, two people who are kind of disconnected coming to a realization with each other. It actually reminds me very much of Finding Nemo, where in there you had the father and the son learning to trust each other and learning to listen to each other. And I felt like Brave did the same thing with the mother and the daughter and the mother, where they had to kind of just learn to listen to each other and understand where each other, with their individual beliefs and choices, were coming from. So I don't know. That was I liked it as a pretty good Pixar movie.
Chris, can you speak to the thing that sparked the most controversy over it for us? Was that article that you had shared about the author that touted it as a great film because of the symbolism and the female, and then what was your take on that again? Can you remind us?
The Ethel Rohan, she's a Irish originally short story writer, and she just basically, like I said, in that whole vein of the movie, struck a larger worldview political chord, where she like a lot of other people, she saw Merida, yeah. She saw her as a kind of the first child's movie heroine that really kind of struck a chord for women's rights and individual women's beliefs, and she tied that into her own personal experiences of the trauma she suffered in her life and the trauma suffered in other women's lives. And so it definitely became a live wire of, some people definitely took it very personally in a kind of cathartic, art as a catharsis way, which, I think if you interpret that for yourself individually in a positive way, that's nothing but good. And obviously some people will have different reactions.
Yeah, well, no, but I think you hit the point that I was trying to remember what you had made about why she felt the need to defend it so much against a lot of the detractors.
But then, the point that you made, someone like Ripley being an equal, female heroine.
Yeah, or Linda Hamilton in Terminator 2, yeah.
Right. Well, yeah, or Linda Hamilton, and definitely agree with that, yeah. But just...
And I understand, I think you're totally right, you can't, as a child, you're not going to connect with those characters, of course.
Right, exactly, yeah, they're the adults.
And you know what, and honestly, I can't make a defense for what I had said before, about her, me disagreeing with her based on that idea, because I can't think of any other young lady heroines off the top of my head that played a similar role as her. But I feel like, not especially on the Disney World, because in Disney World they're always like spoiled princesses, that whatever, which Merida was as well. So in that regard, I'm still a little foggy on that whole thing because I feel like she's not the only female. Well, I guess in the other Disney films, though, no. See, there's like Cinderella and Sleeping Beauty and things like those were leading females that that had similar, but then they were saved by men.
Just having watched the Disney's Beauty and the Beast, I think Belle from that was definitely kind of like she was a midway point between like all the other previous princesses who sat around and waited for the prince to come, and Mira from the Brave.
Well, but I think Disney, like comparing that, or to Disney's credit, I think it's definitely a step in the right direction because Disney princesses always need to be saved by some white knight. But I feel like there's like in all of the stories and media and narratives that have been written since the beginning of time, like there's got to be a young woman that has a much more substantial story to tell than Merida. I like, it just feels weird to me to think, even though like I said, I can't think of one off the top of my head, but it feels very strange to think that like in 2012 was the first time that we've had a young woman stand up for herself, against a bigger plight, and societal shackles and things like that. But
I will say Pan's Labyrinth.
Yeah.
But that was a Spanish language, either PG-13 or R-rated movie. But that's just the first thing that comes to mind.
Obviously, yeah, Brave is way more accessible to younger women, and I applauded for that, and I think, and I'm gonna kind of like, I'm gonna take what both of you guys said to make my point, but like, I can see where like both of you guys are coming from, and I understand, and I don't want to fault Pixar for making a little bit more of a standard Disney kind of film, especially since they're owned by Disney now.
They did make Cars,
but I loved the original Cars. I didn't see Cars 2 on purposely because I like Cars 2 aside. Like, and I thought Dave made a good point, and Dave and I have talked about this before, where we like critics like Roger Ebert more than a lot of other critics because they tend to focus on what the movie is and what it did, as opposed to complaining or criticizing it for not living up to expectations that they had for it, because then you're not really critiquing the film. You're upset because the film didn't live up to your expectations. And I think Brave, the reason that it had the kind of reaction it did for me and like Dave and a lot of other people, I think, like that author that you were talking about, Chris, that was responding to a lot of the criticism, was responding to criticism based on expectations that people had for the movie. But the reason that I feel more justified like criticizing Pixar in this regard, as opposed to like other movies that that have been disappointing because you thought they would be better, like Prometheus. The reason I like Prometheus because I didn't really have any expectations for it, and even if I did, like, I feel like it really was just Ridley Scott's thing, and that it didn't. It really, like, you got to look at it for what it is, not what you wanted it to be, because a lot of people wanted it to be a lot of things, but it really wasn't anything. But Pixar, the problem with Pixar, I think, is that they have created a very unique kind of niche for themselves. That and I actually just read this really interesting article sent to me by this guy at my school. That this article was written for the Harvard Business Review, but it was about. It was talking to the CEO of Pixar, and he was talking about Pixar as a business, how they cultivate it as a creative environment, as opposed to just being, like a normal production company business. And it was just very interesting, the things he had to say about the way that they treat their employees, the kind of freedoms that they give them, the kind of structure that they give them, the kind of intentional lack of structure that they give them, and all that kind of stuff. So Pixar is a very unique company. It's like Apple or something, where you expect when they release something, you expect the finest. They have created that expectation, as opposed to like a film like Prometheus, which was based on work that Ridley Scott had done 30 years or more ago. And he even came out in interviews and said, don't expect this to be what you think it's going to be, because it's not a prequel to Aliens. Or to Alien, and like, so, but Pixar, they have created an expectation that they are going to be different, and that they are going to be higher quality, and they're going to be more thought out. They're going to be less pop culture-y. They're going to be much more like creative and unique and artistic, and intentional about what they create. And they're always going to be pushing the envelope because they're always they're not trying to just churn out films to make money. I mean, the CEO said that, like, we started as a creative entity, and that's what we still see ourselves as something that they're always developing new software for every film. They're always trying to, because they started out as a they weren't a film production company. They were a computer software company. That's how they started out, and they were originally started up by Steve Jobs. So they had that kind of thing. So in context of all that, like, I feel like Pixar, I feel justified, at least, in critiquing them based on expectations that I have for them, because so far, like, they've lived up to that standard that they created for themselves. Like, we didn't create that standard for them. I don't think anybody's created expectations for Pixar that aren't based on expectations that Pixar has already established as true for themselves. You know what I mean?
Like, all the other Pixar movies have kind of given us almost like new worlds, like Living Toys, the whole undersea world,
talking rats and robots. Yeah.
Right. The fact that this was the first one that had humans solely as the main characters.
Yeah, that was interesting.
Did that have any influence, or?
To me, it didn't bother me at all. I don't care through what vehicle they want to tell their stories, as long as their stories are top notch. So, as a disclaimer, like, obviously I was a screenwriting student, and the craft of story is very important to me as an audience member. I'm very interested in, just like, when we talk about songs and songs being well written, and I can appreciate a song of a genre that I may not like for being a very well written song, which is why I've gotten into so many different genres that I didn't used to be into. It's the same with films. Like, I don't care if it's supposed to be a kids movie or family movie, or like a really violent rated R movie or horror movie, romantic comedy. I don't care about that as much as, like, if it's a really good story with really engaging characters, then I'm on board. Like, I don't. So in this regard, so for Pixar's, in context of Pixar, like, I felt like they have been doing that, almost like impeccably all the way through. With some missteps along the way, minor, but like, so in terms of, like, I can go on all about, like, the nitpicky stuff about the movie that didn't work. Disappointed me based on expectations that I had for it. Like Dave was saying, I thought it was going to be this epic film, and I just, I felt, because of, like, the imagery and the you're talking about, like, ancient Scottish history. There's just so much to tell there, and there's such an interesting world to draw from.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and the music was so big, and the theme, fate. That's huge. Like there's all these expectations are created around that film that had nothing to do with the actual plot of the film. That was really, like, a big letdown for me because of what I just said. I mean, just the scope, the expectations of the scope of it, I just thought were, like, a big letdown. Like, I didn't feel like it had to be a big story. But like you said about Nemo being very similar, I agree. Except that Nemo, like Dave was saying, was a huge adventure. It was a very small family story, but it took them through, like, thousands of miles of the ocean, and all these different characters, and all these interesting, like, set pieces, and, like, it felt really big as a film. Like, it was a big story, or I'm sorry, it was a big plot that told a very small personal story. Brave was a small story told with a very small, limited plot.
I'm going to say, like, my final freaking last bit on this, but I almost wonder now, after having talked about all this, if they were ultimately too bound by the traditions of the fairy tale idea.
Yeah.
And also if they, at some point when they were doing this, and, one of Pixar's genius has always been to kind of meld the traditional adventure fairy tale narrative that Disney perfected to a more modern sensibility. Yeah. If they did kind of realize the other gender appeal of this movie and the tie it would have to a modern audience, and if that became kind of so entrenched to something that was a bit different from the original narrative. I don't know. I mean, maybe we'll have Brave 2 and 3 to answer that. But
and going on from the scope, though, I just think that there was just some very basic storytelling elements, like storytelling 101 kind of stuff, that were kind of glaring missteps, which I just didn't quite understand because they've always been so good with this stuff in the past, which include, like, aside from the mother as a bear thing I thought was just kind of dumb, but I understood from what, your assessment of it, Chris. Like, I can see, the value of that plot device, but in general, I thought the movie was just, like, regardless of the plot of it, I thought it was lacking some just very basic things like stakes. Like, I understand, when we talked about before, how you said that the girl, for her, in her context and watching it as a young person who's might feel very similar to her, where you feel like you're a kid and you can't get your way and adults control your life, that feels like really big stakes, like your life is just, you're never going to get to be independent, you're always going to be under someone's thumb, but and maybe kids connected with that, but like as a film, and if you look at the past Pixar repertoire, like they were really good about having a small story that could affect a larger thing. I mean, like WALL-E, saves the world, for all extensive purposes, and like Ratatouille, he like unites people and rats, and like there's always been like a bigger kind of thing going on, like an outside element that gives it a little bit more weight. And what and this almost had that because it had the other clans come in, but then they just became fodder for like fart jokes. Like the Merida really had there was no issue with those other clans, other than the fact that they all wanted to kill the bear.
Well, they were comic relief, yeah.
Yeah, like, and I felt like a missed opportunity where, like, Merida really, and the fact that the way that she kind of united them, I just felt was like really cheap, and it just felt like kind of tacked on, and so like I just felt like in general there was no other stakes for her other than her not getting. Well, basically it was like, what does she have to lose in this scenario? Well, in her mind, she had, it was either like freedom or imprisonment, right? But I don't know, like as an outside audience member, I felt like if she lost, she would still be a spoiled princess, and it wasn't that bad. I mean, it just, I like I said, like I can see why it could feel bad to that character and the kids that could relate to it, but like as a major motion picture, like I just felt like that wasn't enough. And then, or in terms of the stakes thing, I felt like there was really nothing else for her to lose, because like the father was an interesting misstep for me, because they established him really early on as a very reasonable person. Like when he talked to the mother and stuff, he was the sense of reason, and she was very like caught up in her own thing and not paying attention to other people's needs and sensibilities. But the father was very reasonable, and he was talking to her, he was able to kind of like talk to her like the mother, I mean, he was able to talk to her like an adult. And so the fact that like Merida was convinced that he was gonna like kill his mother as a bear, it didn't work for me, because they established the fact that bear had attacked him and he had a vendetta for that bear, but like all Merida needed to do was like shoot him in his other leg so he couldn't run, and then like hold him to the ground and like say, "Dad, you need to listen to me." Like I felt like that was really easy. It was just like they just didn't handle that very well, with the father being so like in this crazy nonsensical rage about trying to kill the bear, that and Merida being so powerless against him, who was established as a reasonable person from the beginning. It just felt like inconsistent that she wasn't able to do anything to get him to understand what was going on. So in that regard, like I didn't feel like there was any real impending danger. And then the magic thing felt like totally had no context. It was just like they didn't explain like like magic in this world, why it was important, like what it meant, like who could harness it or not. There just happened to be a witch, which is fine because it's a Disney movie, but then the witch just turned out to be comic relief too. She had no purpose other than to give the plot, she's a plot device. And so in that regard, I felt like the whole
yeah. I did expect her to be more of like the ultimate villain
or something. Like she just did nothing. She just gave her that cake to eat, and like that was it. Like the whole magic thing I felt was like really inconsistent, and then there was no stakes around that really because we didn't understand the rules about magic. And that's the thing about fantasy is like, fantasy is fine. You guys know this, but like if you're going to tell a fantasy story, the audience has to understand the rules. If they don't understand the rules of your fantasy world, they have nothing to relate it to, and they have no reason to care about if something doesn't go right because you don't know what the consequences are. So it's sort of like we're told that in a few days she could become a bear, but like why should we believe this crazy witch? This didn't work for me at all. I felt there was the fact that her mother might become a bear in a couple days. It just like I didn't care at all, and you know what I mean. Like I felt like everything could have been done almost exactly the same, except they could have changed just a couple little things, and it could have made it an infinitely more engaging movie. And then like they had the evil bear guy show up at the end, and there was like that kind of like little twist about that this had happened before, but they didn't do anything with that. It was just sort of like that was not even a big revelation. It was just like, oh yeah, this had happened before, and we still have to kill this bear, and now he's dead, and then things are kind of back to normal. I thought like just the fact of like them killing the bear, I didn't think was that dangerous feeling because like that whole really long drawn out punchline of like the clans fighting amongst themselves in the dinner hall, it became like a slapstick scene, and they were fighting with weapons and things, but nobody got hurt. So I didn't feel like the violence aspect of it had any weight. Like I didn't feel like anybody was going to get hurt, and if they tried to kill the bear, like there's no reason to
same weapon. Yeah, I do see that, what you definitely mean by that now, but...
Oh, that was the other... So the other screenwriting 101 thing that just didn't work for me and her character was I really didn't know what she really wanted. I knew what she didn't want, but in screenwriting school we learned that if you want to have a solid protagonist, they have to have a very clear want. Like they have to be after something. It doesn't have to be something tangible, but they just have to have a want that drives their motivations to the movie, and in that way you can relate to them, whether sympathetically or empathetically, and then you want to follow their story, and you relate to them, you want what they want, and but Merida, we knew which was what she didn't want. So and then what she did want was to change her fate, but we didn't know to what. You know what I mean? Like what was the alternative to her not being a princess? Because they established early in the movie that she was a very like free thinking, adventurous girl, and like she was able to go out on her own all day. So okay, and then the big thing for me was the movie was called Brave, and I don't understand how Merida was really brave, other than on a very small level of learning. She got past her own BS to trust her mom and to love her mom and be able to show her that, and to eventually save her, in the end and stuff. But like, I didn't really feel like Merida really showed like true bravery at any one point where, she was, because like at the end it was really her mom, and maybe that's what the title was referring to. I don't know.
Yeah.
But like I felt like the movie from the get-go is called Brave. It's a big bombastic, Celtic feeling movie that really just didn't live up to everything that came before it in terms of Pixar and all the hype about it, and just the imagery, and the archery had no role. She was an archer for like no reason, like she wanted to change her fate to nothing that we could figure out, and it was just, I just felt really, really disappointed that Pixar, what it felt like? It felt like a script, like a lot of movies do, that was rushed, and which is not true because they've been working on this script for years. I don't know if it just changed hands too many times, but
underwhelmed by it. It felt like a better made Disney CGI film. Was not Pixar quality. All the music was fantastic.
All right, well, last but not least is Dark Knight Rises. And again, the reason I wanted to talk, I'll try to keep this, I'll rein myself in on this one, but I want to talk about this one too because it was, for me, it was just a huge disappointment. But why don't you guys go first? So, Chris, how did you feel about it?
I've honestly, shifted since I saw it twice, and I've shifted so many times since then. Just to quickly sum it up, I think the first movie was a good, really good kind of coming of age, dramatic action movie. The second movie was a really brilliant crime noir drama, but both of the first two movies and the third movie, they were like all of Nolan's Batman movies were just kind of imperfect masterpieces. They had, in some ways, they were great movies, but they had kind of basic plot holes, character flaws, story flaws. But in some ways, if you could slightly look past that for a second, you could enjoy the movie as a whole. And I feel like the third movie had those same problems. I think the movie didn't overcome the third movie curse in a way. And if anything, it kind of felt like almost the most obvious comic book-like movie of all of these movies that were supposedly transcending the idea of a basic comic book movie. But, I mean, that said, there was, I was kind of swept up in the overall mythical, thematic resolution of everything. I got caught up in Gotham crumbling, even though it should have definitely crumbled more. And I don't know. I'd have to go into longer detail on it, but I maybe would have said it a third time, but it wasn't. It could have definitely been better. There were parts of it I really liked. There were parts of it I wasn't a huge fan of.
Dave?
There were obvious problems with the plot of the movie. I was entertained. I wasn't sucked into it as much as the second one. And the first one had its own thing for making Batman. How I grew up with Batman. I followed him, not the older generations of Batman people. Some of them didn't like the newer Batman, and I used the Dark Knight, the darker Batman, which our generation was brought up in. Honestly, as much as I loved the second one, I did find the plot of it a bit fumbly. Like there wasn't plot to a lot of it. It was a fantastic work of genius. I felt a little bit of fumbling of the plot like it did with this one. The Bane is Bane. I don't really remember him too much from the comics, just from, I know the plot of the whole breaking of Batman and the pseudo-Batman guy that came after him went crazy. All I remember of Bane is him being he took some sort of insane type of new steroid thing, got huge and strong. I don't remember. And then I hear about he let all the classic bad guys out, and Batman had to fight them, so Bane is genius like Batman is. Bane is also one of Batman always has best villains, and Bane was the best new villain of the Batman world. I was actually thinking about this last night. I might be dreaming, but I was kind of wondering. I felt like the whole feel of the Batman trilogy changed when they decided to film the majority of it in New York City. Although Gotham was always a bit model-esque in a noir New York City, it was interesting how they made it in Chicago for the first two, but it seemed like too abrupt of a change. Suddenly it's a New York City feel. And the shots in New York are a bit too obvious, I think, that it didn't seem like a mythical city so much as as Manhattan, obviously. I wasn't super inspired by the Pirates of being in prison, but I have to watch it again. I did enjoy it. I did enjoy. I was very, very skeptical about how Catwoman would have been created, and I actually liked her here. I know I'm not looking for realism or something a bit more believable than was for the '90s films, which were painful. I liked her character a lot. I think she was very good. She had these like futuristic glasses. Like, where'd that come from?
That's on the editing room floor somewhere. Like they must have cut some scenes out because yeah, she just shows up with that costume and those glasses. Like, okay.
At least they try and do something weird where like the cast, brought her back to life and when she's Catwoman, like the Batman Returns.
Yeah.
She was just kind of like a girl from a rough area who was a burglar. And I really liked how they did it right where Catwoman was always, she's a bad girl. She's a femme fatale, and they did that. They really did that. But she was always, you never knew if she was completely good or not, and sometimes she seemed good,
She's just more out for herself, it wasn't good or bad.
She reminds me of Faye from Cowboy Bebop, the anime.
Yeah, totally.
The classic femme fatale. Super beautiful, but kind of bad, really bad, and attitude.
Well, and she uses her beauty to her advantage.
Oh yeah, and her intentions are always ambiguous, Classic character, an archetype.
I felt like she was the best written character of the movie, and is unfortunate for her character, which I thought was so superb, was her stupid motivation of like wanting to get her. Well, her motivation wasn't bad. It was the plot of like she wanted to get that flash drive that would like wipe her digital presence or something, which is so stupid. I can't believe the Nolans.
It was a blatant Deus Ex Machina. Yeah.
It was so bad. I can't believe that the Nolans would actually put that on film. Like,
it was like the opinion of Avatar.
I didn't really bother me, but I'm not as much of a story guy as you two.
You know what, Dave? I think you are. You just don't. You're not conscious about it. But I do think that most people are actually story people. They're just more unconscious. But
Batman, Bruce Wayne was. I mean, he's supposed to be a troubled guy, but I don't know what. I honestly don't know what to think about. I just wanted to see the whole Batman thing ended with not being like a complete failure. So the fact that it wasn't like this horrible letdown to me made me give it the benefit of the doubt with all its flaws and the plot and everything. I just didn't feel the need. I still think about like what do I think about that movie, and it definitely and I felt like it was going to be the weakest of the three. I really did. Like, how could it?
How could it not be? Yeah.
Dude, I was kind of expecting the weakest of the three, but at least a good sort of feel of the other two. Just Christopher Nolan's Batman, Dark Knight. As long as it had that vibe, I wasn't going to have any big issues with it. Cool. I felt like it's good. Like, okay, do this. Whatever house movie is, just do it and end it before you start to get a ton of sequels and completely ruin it. So, me personally, it was the weakest of the three, but I still like and respect it with its decent amount of flaws that could easily be nitpicked. So, what I have to say on that.
Well, for my portion, let me just kind of like redirect some questions back at you then, because I have more questions about it than I do like feelings, because like I kind of mirror your kind of like shoulder shrugging about it, because I don't know how to feel about a lot of it. And I would love to talk to Christopher Nolan about some of this, because I really feel in the end that like it was just a very sloppily, lazily written script that had a lot of really, really good ideas and a lot of really good stuff that they quite like just didn't develop enough, or just didn't know what to do with, or didn't have time for, or whatever. But like, I'm gonna say in general, I thought this was incredibly, I think bloated is a good word, some of this movie for my take. It was just bloated with characters and bloated with plot and bloated with stuff that just didn't, I thought like if you pulled a lot of that stuff away, for instance, some things, I think they could have simplified it easily. I thought they could have cut Catwoman, even though I thought she was great, and she could have been her own movie. But I thought they
he didn't want to originally use her. From what I heard, it was DC Comics
really?
that were like, you need to put her in.
Well, okay, so then in that regard, they did a much better job of shoving a character in that they didn't want, as opposed to like putting Venom in Spider-Man 3 or whatever.
Same exact scenario. Raimi had no interest in using him. Marvel was like, you need to put him in. The fans want him.
But I thought they could have cut her, And they could have cut Joseph Gordon-Levitt, who was the other character that I thought was almost as good as her. I thought he was the more interesting character too. Oh no! Wait! I take it back. No, they could have cut Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character, and they could have had Gary Oldman do all of the investigating that they needed Joseph Gordon-Levitt to do, and then in the meantime.
Oh yeah.
I thought they could have left Bruce Wayne or Batman dying at the end ambiguous, and that Catwoman would resurface as Batgirl, and then then they would have killed two birds with one stone. They could have ended Bruce Wayne's story like they wanted to, and then they could have had the new superhero, the whole like the icon, the symbol take over, but not the person. Which is the theme they wanted to do, which I thought worked. Like, I thought that was cool.
Right.
I thought that was actually the strongest theme of the movie, was the whole idea of Batman as a symbol, which, as a through line for all the movies, I thought that was the strongest thing that held up. But I thought that having Catwoman come up would have been really interesting, more so because then we found out at the end that, of course, that Joseph Gordon-Levitt was Robin. But then it's sort of like, well, is he going to just be Robin? Is he going to be Nightwing? Or is he going to take up as Batman in this world? And, I thought it would have been more, like, Catwoman could have kind of easily become Batgirl, and then she would have still kept the symbol, and then you wouldn't have had to deal with Joseph Gordon-Levitt's character, who just felt so tacked on, even though I thought he was a good character. And then also, like, having Bane there was fine, but then having the girl... Ra's al Ghul's daughter show up like as a twist, which I know they took from the comic books in a way, but like it just felt like totally unnecessary. Yeah, they just didn't do anything with that, and for her being like doing what she was doing, and being like the person above Bane and kind of driving the whole plot of the the bad guy plot, like raises so many questions about like who she was and how she was able to, like, her resources, and like if the League of Shadows and like what they were really after. And so my question to you guys though is like I asked you guys before, is what was her true motivation? I think that like if that was ever answered, that would actually make this a good or bad film in my eyes in terms of the story.
You're very right on this point, Dan. You're very right. I don't know.
Well, and to me that's what kind of ruined the film for me, was that it was very ambiguous, like, but we needed to know that because her motivation is what drove the whole film. She set this whole thing up. She's the reason that Batman needed to come back. So for her motivation, or her motivation to be like ill-defined, kind of like made the rest of the movie inconsequential or just confusing. Because it was one or two things. It was she was really believed in the League of Shadows and her father's work, and she really felt like Gotham needed to be obliterated, but we never saw any evidence, especially in this film, that there was any problem with Gotham. It would seem like a fine place to be, especially because Batman fixed all the crime, and so with that in mind, her other motivation then would have been out of pure revenge that Batman killed her daughter and she wanted him to suffer and then die. But we were never really sure if that's the case, and if that's the case, why did they send him to a prison where everybody was nice to him? So it just didn't hold up. Like, both, it could have been one or the other, but then there wasn't evidence for either. You know what I mean? So like in that regard, that the whole plot of the movie was okay. So to go back to what Dave said, like as a film, I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun. Like it was. Had really interesting flakes of a theme that never really kindled into a fire or whatever, but like I thought there was a lot to enjoy about it. But then when you step back and look at it as a film,
right,
it just made no sense, like in my mind. I thought there were some other like big plot holes of like, again, like the whole overarching bad guy plot that was driving the action was that they would blow up the city in 5 months, and we come to learn that it was going to happen either way, but the people of Gotham didn't know that. Then we learned that the reason they waited so long was because they wanted Bruce to watch Gotham fall, because she wanted to break his spirit and his hope before they killed him. But if they were going to kill him and everybody in Gotham anyway, what did it matter? Why did that matter at all? Why didn't they just kill everybody all at once and just save themselves the trouble? Like, that just didn't make any sense to me at all. And if it really was to have him lose hope, like, he was hopeless at the beginning of the movie. He had no hope. So, and Bane even says before he breaks him, he's like, your mind is broken, or, you know, like, you were broken before I got here, or whatever. So, again, like, kind of like Brave, like, where are the stakes for Bruce? Like, there was nothing for him to lose starting out. Like, you can't have a character with nothing to lose. And then when, like, the one thing he lost, which was supposed to be really emotional, when Alfred left, I mean, Alfred just quit. Like, he didn't die. So I didn't really feel like that was that big a deal. It was like he could have came back on board easily. I don't know. Like, the emotional weight of stuff didn't really have any weight to me. You know, it just, what I was left with at the end was, like, I thought it was kind of an enjoyable film when you don't think about it too much. But then, like, I really didn't care about anything that happened, and I just wasn't into the characters except for the ones that didn't really matter, like Robin and Catwoman. I thought they were interesting, but they weren't really central characters that had much to do with the actual plot. They were just sidekicks, you know, that were kind of doing their own thing.
Yeah.
So, a few last thoughts. I wouldn't say that Gotham was a great place to live at the outset of the film, because it was essentially this kind of ambiguous supposed police state where everything they achieved was through underhanded means. But at the same time, we never saw the full extent of that, nor did we see the full extent of Bane dragging the city down into, you know, chaos, darkly as we saw it in the first one or the second one.
Right.
And also the main thing, you know, what did Talia al Ghul, you know, what was her main motive? I've been reading this graphic novel that's like it was definitely a collection put out in anticipation of the movie that collects, like, I think, like 2 decades worth of, like, 5 stories of Batman versus, like, Ra's al Ghul and Talia al Ghul, and the emotional spectrum she has for Batman across these multiple decade stories, where, like, when she first meets him, she's attracted to him, but she doesn't want to betray her father and her father's ideal, which she sincerely believes in, to the point where she fully loves him, and she realizes that her father's a truly evil person, and they have a child together, but then the child dies supposedly, and then by the end she's fully committed to her father's vision again. But you also know that she has a bitterness over the son that she thinks that she lost, that was her and Bruce Wayne's. They tried to take all of that and compress it into 5 minutes of movie.
Yeah.
And it just didn't work. That's all there is to it. It just didn't work.
Yeah, it is kind of aggravating, because I feel like the Nolans had a lot of opportunity to kind of tell a simpler story, but I think they got so caught up with, and there's so much material in the Batman universe, you know, that they felt like they wanted to pull a lot of things. Like, they wanted the Ra's al Ghul stuff, they wanted a little bit of No Man's Land, which I think is, you know, like one of the finest works of Batman's tales, but they never really got to explore any of it with any real substance or depth, so it kind of made all of it inconsequential in the end, you know, like.
I still wonder how much of it was, like, DC pressuring them, you need to do this, you need to do that. I mean, even from the second one, it's like, with Two-Face, they had a potential, he could have been the main villain for the third one.
Absolutely. Well, but at least we have those films now, and we can completely forget about the Joel Schumacher films.
You can always watch the cartoon again.
And yes, like you said, yeah, at least we have the animated series, which is definitely the finest Batman work ever put on screen. The song pick for this episode is another track by the Baltimore-based band whom I had featured on episode 13 called Margret Heater. This is off their second album called Frankenrecord, and the track is called Apollo Conspiracy. On it you can hear that they definitely evolved their sound a little bit. Things got a little bit more crisp and produced, and they really kind of stepped it up a little bit, kind of came into their own. And unfortunately, again, that they broke up in the early 2000s, but at least they left us a couple outstanding records to remember them by. So again, this is Apollo Conspiracy by Margret Heater off their second album called Frankenrecord. The main website for this podcast is bumusicast.wordpress.com. Please leave us feedback there in the comments section, or please email us at breathingunderwater1@gmail.com. You can also follow us on Twitter at breathingunder, but I'm only really going to post when we have a new episode available. Other than that, there's not going to be much other web presence for now. I'm just trying to keep things simple. So if you need to contact us, WordPress or email is probably the best bet.
All views and opinions expressed in this podcast are those of the persons expressing them and have no relation to the companies, artists, or bands discussed.
In addition, the participants of this podcast claim no rights or ownership of the musical media, songs, sound clips, etc. presented in this podcast, which are solely for promotional purposes. If there are any issues with any content presented in this podcast, please contact us and we'd be happy to take care of it.
So please do not sue us or be a hater.
Thanks for listening.